Okay. Uh, Good afternoon, one and all, and thank you so much for having me here. Uh, the title of my presentation is COVID-19 pandemic and question of human dignity of migrant workers from the narrative of indigenous tribes of Northeast India. As our chairperson has already stated, the world has changed after the pandemic, and it has changed to such an extent that it might take maybe decades to undo the damages it has done. And the impact is so much, the pandemic impact is so much that our lives have have been topsy-turvy, turned around, and there are many legal issues that also come up. And this problem is not just merely of India problem; it's a global problem. And amidst all this pandemic and then uh, mm, the shattering of the economies and other things, and then there is a uh, mm, there is this issue of xenophobia which has come up, and which has been very problematic one, and it's not it's a global problem. And uh, the idea of placing geographic origin has been a very problematic one. For example, Ebola, which came up some years back, it has its origin from the river in Congo. So because of that geographic attribution of the origin of the disease or the or the epidemic, the African people have to go through certain kind of racial discrimination. Now, in the current issue of the COVID-19, the WHO was very careful that there should not be any geographic attribution to the pandemic. However, some of the state actors, particularly state leaders of the United States, let's say Donald Trump, in a certain tweet, he said it is a China virus. And Pompeo also has said it is a Wuhan virus. Now, it's a non-fact, let's say, that maybe the pandemic originated from Wuhan, let's say that, and then the investigation also say it originated from that place. Now, the repercussion of that particular geographic indication to a particular disease is that whoever looks like a Chinese is a probable target now of racial discrimination, or what we call racism. And it is a global phenomenon. And for example, it is also much of an issue when it comes to Chinese American. In America, Chinese American, their business, their restaurants could not thrive, and people were attacked because they were treated as somebody who is a carrier of a disease. So many of the Chinese American who might have been living in America for a long time has to go through that. And not only China, there are reported cases of such type of xenophobic reaction in United Kingdom, in the metro, and also in Russia also, whereby the police force simply came up to the house of where certain Chinese people were living, and then they took them away for some kind of test in a very inhuman and undignified way. And similar incident happened in Australia also, where people of Chinese descent were denigrated by saying that they were dog eaters, and then they were dumb whore, all this. And then this phenomenon it could be attributed for many reasons, because racism in today's context of social media and then the pervasiveness of internet, it can happen online and offline. Now, the online part, we have the social media, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, etc. For example, I took the example of Donald Trump. He is very notorious in calling the disease a China virus, let's say. And that tweet has come through the Twitter, social media, and he has lots of followers, right? And likewise, the pervasiveness of the internet and then all the social media instrument that we have, the racism can spread from that context also. Another context is the offline one, whereby you say maybe one part is the print, but it's not only that. Now, in the context of the offline, it may be at personal level, like a place of work, or maybe place of accommodation like hotel, etc. And also it could be a place of business where you have grocery item, essential commodities which are being sold, or maybe park, place of leisure, or place of entertainment also. And also place of professional workplace like educational institution, or maybe office, or any other places. And in the professional place, it will be further divided into sectors. It may be service sector, or maybe public sector, or maybe in the academy also. And if you see the issue of racism and xenophobia because of COVID-19, and then the issue of human dignity are closely connected with that notion of idea of racism and xenophobia. Now, if we try to define xenophobia as per the United Nations Human Rights Office of the Commissioners, it says that xenophobia is a word derived from Greek, which means xenos means where you are dealing with foreigner or maybe a stranger, and phobos in that context is the fear. So the idea is you are fearful of somebody whom you think is a foreigner, or which you think is a stranger. And in the work of Canna Raphaelis Jones, it describes that racism works at three levels. One is the institutionalized racism. Then the second one is personally mediated racism. And then the third one is internalized racism. So while explaining these levels of racism in this work of Jones, it says that when you say institutionalized racism, it means where there are different levels to access to goods, services, and opportunities, and it may sometimes be legalized or institutionalized and become an inherited disadvantage. So anyone who looks like a Chinese, let's say, anyone who looks like a Chinese in today's context of COVID-19 is vulnerable to be treated with fear. The idea of that racism and then that xenophobia, right? Now, in that institutionalized context is are a particular group of community who looks like maybe what is your facial description of a Chinese, is he or she or the community being denied access, right, to grocery shop, or maybe to places of shelter, hotels, or maybe to medical facilities. And if that happens, that ends up being falling under the first level of institutionalization of racism. The second one is the personally mediated racism, whereby the level says it is an assumption about others in terms of their abilities, motive, intention based on their race. Intentional or unintentional includes both commission and omission. So there is an idea of intentionally doing it, and that intention of denigrating or maybe throwing expulsion or giving misgivings against a particular group of person because of maybe of their color or maybe of their feature, even if one might have perpetrated it, or there's an act of omission, but then in any way allows those type of racism or racial profiling, and causing certain kind of discomfort or maybe disadvantage to access to grocery items or maybe health institutions and all that. That is a personalized mediated racism. Then the third level is the internalized racism, whereby there's an idea of acceptance of negative messages by stigmatized race, and it involves accepting limitation of one's own full humanity, including one's spectrum of dreams, one's right of self-determination, and one's range of allowable self-expression. Now, I bring to the learned members who are part of this conference the Northeast context of the COVID-19 and then the migrant issue is a real one. It's a real one. And the Indian narrative of what makes the social fabric of India, that is, it is a diverse one and it is a pluralistic society. And uh, because of that idea of citizenship and then the plurality of the society, spanning from Jammu and Kashmir to Kanyakumari to the west in Gujarat, Maharashtra to the east in Bengal and then the northeast. And particularly the seven states, including 8 states, including Sikkim, the northeast part of India, more or less, is dominated by community which belongs to Mongoloid stock. And in certain anthropological and linguistic narrative, they come under the Tibeto-Burman community or Afro-Asiatic community in the Meghalaya among the Khasis, Garos, and Jaintias. Now, uh, of course, this northeast area is landlocked, and then in its conception also, there was this understanding that this community is backward, right? And the backwardness is attributed to that idea of maybe race or the peripheral in that context. Now,
Tombing, can you just wind up in 1 or 2 minutes?
Okay. Okay. So since we are running out of time, I'll just wind up what I wanted to discuss. In fact, in the report that is available till March, the month of March, where the COVID pandemic has peaked, the idea of COVID has rapidly come up in India. There has been instances of reported cases of around 20 plus cases where the people from the Northeast have been in one way institutionalized or maybe impersonalized or maybe in some way internalized. They have to face xenophobic reaction from across the country, including Delhi, Gujarat, Pune, Maharashtra, Chennai, and all these places. And these reported cases, in one way, reflect this idea that the issues and concern of xenophobic reaction pertaining to the COVID-19 is very real for the northeastern people of India. There were instances in Delhi where a woman was eating food in a restaurant and she was enjoying her food, and then in Delhi she was asked to leave the restaurant because there was an alleged notion that she might be carrier of the COVID-19. There was also an instances where some Naga boys in Chennai, they were asked to leave their place of rented place to, and then they have to take shelter under the footpath. There's also been instances where in Gujarat, women were not allowed by the Residential Welfare Association to continue staying in their place. And there has also been instances in Delhi where MPhil student of DU, she was spat on and then she was shouted on by one person that she is a coronavirus and then she looks a Chinese. Okay, so the idea of the COVID-19 and when it hits at the migrants or maybe migrants who could be laborers, migrants who could be in pursuit of higher studies or maybe in some place of work. A particular official of NCRT was unnecessarily harassed. A lady officer was unnecessarily harassed in Delhi in the NCRT office just because she looks like a Chinese. And it was done by the same Indian citizenry people. It's just that the mainstream facial description did not in any way are similar to the northeastern Mongoloid stock and all that. So in the COVID-19 and then the xenophobia and then the racial levels of racism that is there, one is as institutionalized, one is another internalized, and the other levels of racism are prominently there, and that hits at the idea of national integrity. And since the migrants of Northeast and since the population of Northeast is minority of minority, when such type of incident comes up and then it is not properly dealt with a clarity of the law, it ends up becoming a question of existential issue. And with this note, I would conclude my presentation. Thank you.